So the next mutant on the chopping block for our series Iron Man vs. the Mutants is Quicksilver. And Quicksilver is an interesting one, especially because he got a massive buff in the last couple of years where he's been able to outrun reality, and that poses a lot of problems on what would actually affect him. But I think we actually have the answer in the form of another mutant, Bobby. This is because we know that Absolute Zero within the Marvel Universe is able to affect things on a quantum level, which is backed up by IRL science because it's defined as the lowest possible temperature that anything can achieve. And this is because there's no movement within the atom. And now that's technically a misleading statement because there is still activity within the atom and still activity with the atom. But it should be noted that not all of these movements with the atom and the things within the atom are actually causes of the atom itself, and rather the outside things affecting. But for the purposes of this, it means that the atom in a person would no longer be able to go forward in space. So essentially, this is to say that Tony would be able to easily defend against Quicksilver by just using his Absolute Zero aura to freeze him in place. Now, the second thing that Tony has in his arsenal that could be very useful against Quicksilver is the fact that he has the ability to use 0-point energy, which would essentially allow him to just bring everything to Absolute Zero without actually having to lower the temperature. And this is because Absolute Zero and 0-point energy are intrinsically linked because they're essentially the same thing. 0-point energy is just defined as the minimum non-zero amount of energy that an object produces. This is because it would break Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which is basically just a fancy way of saying that because particles act like waves, we have no way of telling what the particle's momentum or position with absolute accuracy, which means that there is always going to be a small and very finite position in which those particles can be detected. Therefore, the particle is assumed to be moving within that very finite location. That finite location is called the 0-point energy, and is also what Absolute Zero would bring a particle down to. This last reasoning has to do with Newton's first law of motion, and that is that an object in rest will stay in rest, and an object in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. This is important because the thing that keeps an object in motion or keeps an object at rest is called inertia. Iron Man has the ability to manipulate inertia values, meaning that he can make the inertial value of something so great that it will never move unless a force acted upon it is greater than the inertia value. We also know that he can simply remove the inertia from something, effectively statuing it because it has no inertia to keep it in motion. With the caveat being that if the kinetic energy of the object would then exceed the inertia value that was placed upon it, then the object would just continue to be in motion. And then just for a little bit of recap on why we think that Iron Man would be able to do these is because Iron Man has been able to keep up with the likes of Quicksilver in his earlier appearances, specifically the West Coast Avengers 1985 run, which is one of the only times we actually get to see the Iron Man suit actually fight Quicksilver. And this isn't actually Tony fighting him, this is Rhodey in the Iron Man armor. But still, if Rhodey's able to do it in Tony's armor, then Tony could also do it in Tony's armor. Also, he's been able to keep up with the likes of Silver Surfer or Thor. He's also been able to move faster than thought and react faster than instantaneously.